Saturday afternoon, almost its last session, and we're going to talk about security and governance. Very excited for you guys to be here. I love to do this session. I actually do this session quite regularly, but we update so many things. There are so many changes continuously. So I think even now the slides, it's 40% is new since the last time I did it like a month ago somewhere else. So we keep on updating because this is probably one of the most important features of Power BI that no one knows about. Every session I've done, afterwards people come up to me and say, I had no clue that this was possible with Power BI. So let's go and talk about it. Quickly, one of the reasons why this is so important is Power BI is growing like crazy, as you all know. So 300,000 organizations, 66 million reports open daily. It's quite an interesting number. But really the one that I'm interested on is the bottom one. 7 petabytes of data transferred daily in Power BI service. The chart on the side, I like to call that out. That is usage, the actual usage of Power BI. You can see the valleys and the peaks. The valleys are Christmas. People are, of course, not. This is actually the only time that people are not using Power BI. All right. So what has been changing over the last couple of years is that Power BI has become become everywhere. It's managing your organization's data. So it's enterprise self-service BI. Organic growth in Power BI organizations, large numbers of artifacts. Like we have customers with more than 1 million workspaces. I don't know if you can imagine how you can manage that, but it's a lot of work. It's crazy. So it's large amounts of data going in. You want to do self-service, but also those enterprise analytical apps like an HR app and things like this. So managing those is a big chore. Of course, it needs to be an enterprise-grade platform, so you need to have oversight, governance. And again, we're going to talk a lot about this today. And data protection. Yeah, you want to make sure that your data is protected. And again, we're going to spend a lot of time on those two. And this is probably the most important part. And this is where we see is also still a lot of struggle, although it's getting better. It's self-service BI, bottoms up, business-led, agility of distribution. So they should be able to just share data with others. Centralized BI is top-down, IT and hybrid-led, governable security. It's the other way around. So bottom-up is self-serve. And this is the easy part. It's driven by Power BI enthusiasts. They have found Power BI in the online community. They look at Marco and Alberto and Avi and Patrick and Adam, of course. They know what's going on, but might not think about security. And this is the same for probably everyone in this room. We know DAX, we know modeling, we know data warehousing, we know how to do tables. This is an afterthought. It's also, to be honest, it's a bit boring topic. Like, yeah. It's not as sexy as writing a good DAX expression. So to grow Power BI further, you need IT to support it. But as soon as you start talking to them about, hey, let's do this. I remember I joined the Power BI CAT team like 6 years ago. We were in a different phase of Power BI. Then it was oftentimes, hey, the business units found out that there is something called Power BI, and they started installing it on their machines. How do I turn this thing off? Because they say, oh my God, all this data, only people just do whatever. I have no control. I don't know what's going on. So what about security, data sovereignty, GDPR, data loss? Like, oh, they have this. They went on the train and they forgot their USB stick and they had all the financial reports on it. Oops. Governance. So how do I make sure that these things are not happening? So IT needs to start thinking about it. So what do you tell your security team? That's what we're going to talk about today. First, the majority of the things that we have in Power BI around security are actually not Power BI features. They are larger Microsoft features. Because Microsoft is very serious about their security, of course. So these are, again, some of those numbers. 5 billion threats blocks per month. 600 billion authentications per month. And the numbers are just staggering. But I think the most important one is we have, I think, almost 4,000 security experts at Microsoft working on making sure that the whole ecosystem and everything is secure. So again, what do you tell the security team? We're going to talk about 3 main topics. How do I know who authenticates? How do I know my data is secure? And how do I know we're not leaking data? So how do we know how we authenticate? Well, we know this because Power BI is part of the larger Microsoft Cloud. We also run on Azure, of course. So the security system we didn't build ourselves. We hook into Azure Active Directory. Just like every other Microsoft service, Office, Dynamics, whatever, your own custom applications, maybe your machines, your Windows machines, they all run on the same AED. So we're using all those same things. So once you set it up, it is secure for all your Microsoft estates. So that's a really nice thing. And you also, licensing is part of AED. So in AED, you can also set up your licensing. You don't have to, you can use Office, but under the covers, everything is running on AED. Everyone gets a free Power BI license. And they can go and use my workspace, but you can turn that off. A lot of people don't know that you can turn that off. It has effects because you also cannot sign into Office anymore. So then you have to go in and assign the license manually to everyone. So you turn off this automatic license giving, and then you do have to do it manually. But it is possible to turn off. Okay, so this is probably the most important part. Azure AD supports multi-factor authentication. It's enabled for the admin portal, and you can connect it to anything, like Azure AD, so you can get a phone call or a text or Azure Authenticator app. This is probably the most important thing that everyone should do. Turn on multi-factor authentication. Okay. Now, this is also interesting. Like, Power BI allows you, and this is also, some organizations turn this off immediately, but others, they say this is a lifesaver because we need to share data and reports with people outside of my organization. So Power BI supports B2B, which is a feature in Azure Active Directory. And it can be controlled, so you can turn it off if you do not want that. You can completely turn it off. Or you can say only this person or that team or whatever is allowed to share to people outside the organization. The coolest thing about this thing is it means it uses a remote account. So that means if someone would share a report with me at Microsoft.com account, and I would leave Microsoft tomorrow, and now my account would get disabled, I immediately don't have access anymore to the report that got shared with me. Instead of me having to create a new username and a password, in that when that report gets shared with me, it is connected to my organization's AD account. So that's really cool. And all the rules and the regulations that go, like multi-factor authentication, all of these things are automatically applied. So you know that when you share your data with someone else, it's secure. You make sure of it. Again, there's a lot of things that you can turn off and things like turn off invitations. Only admins can do it and all of these things. So this can be heavily controlled too. But I think the most important topic here is that B2B is actually part of Azure, B2B, of AED, and yeah, it can be configured as such. Now, user access control, again, this is not a Power BI feature per se, but if we work together with Intune, which allows you, like for example, every one of us has a mobile phone, and if they want to use Power BI and want to look at reports on your mobile phone, you want to make sure that not when someone finds that phone, they can just open it up and look at the Power BI report. So you can say, okay, if people install Power BI on their machine and want to log in with their corporate credentials, you have to have a PIN on your mobile phone. So it just cannot find it. Otherwise, they cannot log into the mobile phone. It's impossible. So again, that's an Intune feature. So Power BI works with them, and that is configured as such. You can even say, like, hey, when they leave the organization, wipe that Power BI mobile data and on the app. So they won't be able to keep that data when they leave the organization too. Now, this is probably my favorite feature of AED that really no one knows about. It's called conditional access. And with conditional access, you can actually, kind of the name gives it away, you can have conditional access to who can log into Power BI. So you can, for example, say which IP range can connect. So for example, this is maybe not a good example more in these days, but you could have given the example like only when they're inside the premise of my organization, like when they come to the office, they can log into Power BI. They cannot log into Power BI anywhere else. That's a rule that you could set up here. You can control which devices they can connect to. Like Okay, you can only say when you are connected on a corporate device that you got from your boss, those are the ones that are allowed to log into Power BI. You cannot log into Power BI anywhere else. Only certain users can connect. Again, at AD you can say, well, only business group A can connect to Power BI and no one else. When to do two-factor authentication, that's another important thing. Like for example, at Microsoft, we have pretty interesting two-factor authentication. I almost never have to do two-factor authentication. I never get that pop-up message. Because when I'm on my laptop, for example, that's already considered a two-factor authentication, so I don't have to do it. If I would log in from my personal device, then I get a two-factor authentication. So you can make combinations, and that's where things get really interesting. For example, you can say, well, I want everyone to be able to connect to Power BI only when they're inside the actual building, but except admins. Admins should be able to always log into Power BI. And the same thing goes with device. So there's a lot of variations and things that you can tweak and tune here. Private endpoints, that's another topic. Everyone thinks, yeah, you have a quick question? Oh.
Can you block people only from downloading data when they're outside of the organization? For example, I connect from my personal phone to Power BI, that's fine.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
The question is, can you correct people from blocking downloading data?
Don't have to repeat that over
That's
mic.
true. But
Thank you.
we'll get to that. So private endpoints, traffic, that's another feature that a lot of people think they want, but it's very complicated and very hard. Private links allows you to control the traffic to Power BI following an organization's private link. So for example, with private links, you can turn off that no one can log into Power BI unless they are in your own private network that your organization has set up. So it's an extra security layer. It's like VNets, if you will, but it's a bit different. It's called private links. So you can Power BI will deny all the requests that don't come from that configured network path. It's a very complicated feature. Because, yeah, but it's a networking feature. It's not necessarily related to Power BI, but Power BI does support it, so you can set that up. Now, admin control, administrators can control whether users can self-sign up. You can add them manually. It's shared with Office 365. And there's a lot of admin. I don't know if anyone here isn't Power BI admin, but I recently went back to the admin page and the help document. Like, it just goes on and on and on with all the different variations and features. It's never enough, I get that. We always want to have this. I want to configure this, I want to control this. But we keep on adding, controlling who can share contacts, who can export data, who can try Power BI paid features. I actually didn't know this. It's because I was preparing to update the session. I didn't know we had a custom message before publishing reports option. I didn't know, but you can actually have a message show up to your users before you publish reports. I didn't know. And what's new is My Workspace governance, and this is really cool feature too. So this allows you to configure who uses My Workspace in what capacity. Yeah, this is really cool, and a lot of customers have been asking for this, especially highly regulated customers. So you can configure My Workspace too. Okay, so now let's talk about how do I know my data is secure? And this again is a question that no Power BI developer ever asks. But as soon as you start talking to InfoSec teams, this is the question that comes up immediately. So there are a couple of types of, I'm quickly going to skip to this. There are a couple of types of data in Power BI. Imported data, so we actually download it in Power BI Desktop, and you upload it to Power BI. Now the data is in the service. So data is moved to Power BI, it's leveraging its in-memory engine. You need to refresh it, so there are saved credentials in the service. We'll talk about how they are stored in a second. To refresh, there's a live connection or direct query mode, so data stays in this location. So maybe you have an on-premise SQL server that you want to connect to in direct query mode, or an on-premise analysis services, and then the data does not get stored in Power BI. It uses saved credentials to connect to it, or again, it can use AD to connect to something, then no credentials are stored except the username. Actually, even the username might potentially not even be stored if you do a live connect with your own AD credentials. And then finally, push data. I'm not going to talk about this because you should never use that anymore. But yeah, imported, live connection, those are the main two types. So how does Power BI handle data? Again, this is also a question that comes up when you have InfoSec discussions. generally data is in process, so it moves around in the Power BI service in the backend from one machine to another. Because we're a SaaS service, we have all kinds of machines sitting there, and it's moving between, or it's data at rest. At rest is where the interesting part is, because that's actually the file that has been stored in the Power BI service. Data in transit between Power BI and data source is always encrypted through HTTPS. And depending on the data source, data may be stored in the service or retrieved just in time, but it's always encrypted. That's the most important part. Most of this part of the presentation comes from the Power BI security white paper. So if you have more questions, your security team or your InfoSec team comes with questions, the Power BI security white paper is where you can go to find all the questions. Like it's, I don't know how big it is, like 30 pages or 40 pages or something. It just talks about all these things like TLS 1.2 for HTTPS and things like this. It all comes from the security white paper. And it gets updated all the time, yeah. So what types of data at rest are there? And this again is the most important part, is that's what people care about. The data itself, obviously, that's in the data set. Credentials to connect. The metadata, the report layout, visual cache is used to cache the dashboards. This can be tuned, how often it's being refreshed. And the dataset cache, again, used to cache dataset queries from the reports. This can be tuned too. So that's data that actually gets stored somewhere. So where does it get stored and how is it encrypted? The user data is stored in Azure Blob Storage. It's double encrypted. Encryption keys are stored in an internal Microsoft service in a separate location. No one touches it. It's automatic. So fully managed by a Microsoft service. So that's a question that often gets asked. How do you update? How often do you rotate? It's automatically managed by a service. There's no actual developer who has access or go look at things. The metadata is stored in Azure SQL. The encryption keys for Azure SQL TD, it's managed by SQL itself. We just turn on encryption for SQL, and then SQL takes care of it. Encryption keys for credentials, things are interesting here. The on-prem data sources are in the gateway on the customer's infrastructure. So if you use a gateway, the credentials are actually stored partly in the cloud and partly on-prem, but no one can ever see the credentials itself. I mean, the credentials are not even stored in the cloud. One part of the key is stored in the cloud, the other part of the key is stored on-premise, and together, when you connect, that's what they use. For cloud data sources, it's in the data movement role. That's our internal service, and again, it's using SQL encryption. The most important thing here is that encryption key in Azure Blob Storage, because that's really the most interesting part, because that's where your data lives. Now, some customers say, okay, well, all nice, the Microsoft encrypts our files. I want to have my own encryption keys. It's a checkbox that's sometimes needed. So you can bring your own key. You do need a premium capacity to be able to encrypt. You can encrypt every premium capacity you have for different keys if you want. So you use Azure Key Vault by HSM. You can assign to different premium capacities. And then you can say, well, okay, I want to remove access, for example. And then all your data is gone. And this is interesting for subpoena cases or something like this. Some law firms want to be able to manage this in this way. It also works with PPU, by the way. This is interesting. So if you have premium per user, you can encrypt all your premium per user capacities too. Again, pretty heavy-handed, but some companies have this requirement. They need this, they want this, so we give it to them, and they can use it. Again,
here's what I found.
Oh, here's what I found. All right. Network security. Again, this is an important feature, obviously, because Power BI supports a few things, and this is getting more and more security in Azure too, obviously. So Azure Private Links, we already talked about that. Network security. Power BI also supports service tags. So let's say you have a SQL Azure database, and some people ask us, what's the IP address of Power BI so I can open my firewall? Well, Power BI is a cloud service in Azure, so we don't know either. It changes continuously. We have a range, but even that range changes very often. You can, if you really want to, download the network assignment lists in Azure. And that will actually exactly tell you which IP addresses are in Power BI, but it can change any moment. So you don't know when, so you have to keep it up to date. Some people do it. It's what works. But Power BI also supports service tags. And service tags is a feature in Azure that can say, okay, well, open Power BI for this SQL database, open this SQL database to Power BI. So you can say a service tag Power BI is allowed. So that's frankly doing the same thing. It's just continuously updating the IP addresses for this Power BI service. Now, probably the most important one is VNets, because no one has data in Azure that is not sitting in a VNet anymore, which makes a lot of sense. So Power BI also supports connectivity to Azure VNets in two ways. One, you can install a VM sitting inside of that VNet too, and then you can use that gateway that you install on that VM to connect to the data. That's one option. The other option is, that's currently in preview, is the data gateways, the VNet data gateways. That is a managed service by Microsoft. It's in preview. It's not GA yet. And it's going to take a little bit longer for that to actually become GA, but that's possible. And then you don't have to install VMs anymore and things like this, which is a hassle. Everyone gets that. So, but Power BI does allow supporting to VNets because, yeah, we need to be able to. Now, another question that comes up quite regularly is, where is my data stored? You can see where your data is stored. If you go to About Power BI in the top, you can see it, where your service is stored. It is stored where you set it up the first time. So someone set up Power BI for the very first time, and then they had to choose where it was signed up. But it could be long ago, like 10 years ago or something, or Power BI doesn't exist for 10 years, but when Power BI just got started, someone started playing with it and then picked it, or it is connected in the same region as where your Office 365 is. So that's automatically. So my data is stored in the same region. So Power BI is a SaaS service. So we take care of like high availability, for example. There's also a document that talks about that, by the way. So for example, if the whole Western Europe data center in Azure would go down, and I really hope not, then automatically Power BI would be taken over by the North Europe data center in Ireland. So data stays in Europe. But if you pick Australia, data stays within Australia. If you pick the UK data center, then data stays within the UK. Even when the whole data center goes down, because we have two data centers in the UK. So one takes over from the other one. So it never leaves the region. This is very important for data sovereignty reasons, obviously. We don't want our data to travel somewhere else. Again, this is talking data at rest, obviously, because if you open a browser and you're in the US and you log into your Europe, then yeah, the browser has your data and it travels to the US because you opened it. Again, if you don't want any of that, conditional access is your friend, you can turn it off too. So control data residency, that's another important topic that a lot of people ask about. Okay, so I have a multinational organization and I have Power BI. I'm in the US, like Power BI, the Power BI team, Microsoft has Power BI running in the US. So when I log into Power BI, I automatically go to the US, all my data is stored in the US. Obviously, we're fine with that because it's in our own data center. But some people say, well, when I have customer data, especially like countries like Germany, they're very vocal about that. If you have the customer data, I want to make sure it's stored in Germany. So you can create a premium capacity that is running in Germany, and when people upload data in their workspace, it automatically goes to Germany, and it stays there, it's stored there. There's a lot of different regions, like all the dots there are Power BI data centers, so everywhere you can pick it. There are a few interesting exceptions. Actually, only one, China. So we have a data center in China. Power BI runs in China, but it's not managed by us. It's managed by a Chinese organization. And the clouds, as you might have heard from the Great Firewall, the clouds don't even talk to each other. So, yeah, that's just completely separate. But you do have Power BI there. So you can run it. And we actually have some multinationals who do run Power BI in China too. They just cannot talk to each other. They cannot share data. They cannot do anything because they're all firewalled off. All right. So now we get to the interesting part. This is the stuff, like all the other stuff is automatically there. You have options for it. This is interesting things that most people actually don't know about, that it exists. First of all, Power BI is fully auditable. Again, this is something you might not know either because it's not in the Power BI Admin Center. Of course, you can click on it and it takes you to the Office 365 Admin Center. So this is actually an Office 365 Admin Center where you can see everything that happened. Someone opened a report, someone downloaded some stuff, accessed the getting, configuring. They made updates to the report. They deleted reports. It's fully auditable, but it only stays there for 30 days. After that, it doesn't exist anymore. And you do need to be an Power BI admin to be able to have access to this. This is sometimes also a problem. You can get different role. M365 admin also can get to it, but Power BI admin also gets to it. But also you can get different role added to it, and then you can get Office 365 log file viewer role added to it, and then you can also get access to it. Most people do is, as a Power BI admin, you also have access to APIs that give you exactly the same data. So they will just run the APIs, get the data, because you might want to keep the data anyway for longer than 30 days. If you really want to look at this yourself, my colleague Rui has an amazing tool called Power BI Monitor on GitHub. You just download it and set it up, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. That thing shows you, and then you can also have like statistics and stats about everything that people are doing, because the logs tell you everything. So he made a really good, cool-looking reports and dashboards on, who's using my Power BI reports, what are they doing, and things like this. So Power BI is fully auditable. Again, it's not part of Power BI. We just leverage Office 365 for this. Now, the other important thing, and again, I don't know if you are aware of it, but Purview is now a much broader term. Purview is not just the lineage tool anymore. It's many more things in it. It's now for all your governance features. Power BI integrates fully with Microsoft Purview. If you want to have a map of your data estate, what is going on in my estate? What are people doing with the data? I wanted to catalog it. But now also contains the compliance portal, which used to be in Office. So now it's the Purview compliance portal, and this is probably the feature that many people have, but haven't even turned on for Power BI. So Power BI supports a lot of different things: data map, data catalog, data estate insights, information protection, data loss prevention, audit. So all of these things are supported for Power BI too. So maybe if you have a PowerPoint file or an Excel file where you can see that data protection label on it, many people have that turned on for Office, but they didn't turn it on for Power BI, which is quite interesting. They just don't know it exists. This is the key feature, in my mind, for big organizations to start trusting Power BI and start trusting people to do more with data themselves without IT being involved. So information protection in Power BI. So the most important thing, what this thing does, it allows you to set sensitivity labels on data sets, reports, data marts. And it also, again, this is going back to your previous point, if you download to Excel, it travels with it. So if it's highly sensitive information and you download it to Excel, it travels with it. So only highly confidential people, when you have highly confidential information, you need to be logged in to be able to see it. It's protecting data, and that scenario that I talked about before, imagine that you left your highly confidential file on the tube and on a USB stick, and someone else finds it, he cannot open it because it's highly confidential data. You have to be signed in to be able to open it and see it. Now, if you come back to your security team and say, hey guys, well, we have this highly confidential thing, no one is able to open it. I can email it to my family or whatever. They only can open the Power BI desktop file when they have access to it, when I can log in to the Power BI account. So that's important. All right. Automatic workbook labels, that's another important thing. Again, it travels. So again, you see here, I'm connected to Power BI dataset that's highly confidential, and immediately see that bar on top saying, hey, now your Excel file is highly confidential too. So it travels, and it travels really far. It has a completely going from all the way from your SQL Server database all the way to Excel. So if your SQL Server database is highly confidential, you import that data to Power BI, automatically your Power BI file is highly confidential. And then when you open it, export the data to Excel, it becomes highly confidential automatically. So it travels. You can kind of see here, everything is now highly confidential setup. So all the way from Azure to Excel, it's secured. Now, the most important thing is, and this is a new feature, I don't know, it's a couple of months old, Gabi, I think? A couple of months old. Now you can actually go ahead and say, well, okay, what is my default for everyone who creates, like at Microsoft, when I open a Power BI desktop file, by default it's highly confidential. So by default it's secure. If I want to change it, I can change it to public, like anyone can see this file, which I often do because I only use Power BI for demos. But the default setting, that's important. So now everyone who opens a Power BI is automatically secure and safe, highly confidential. Now, and this is the other really cool feature, and this is called data loss prevention policies. And data loss prevention policies allow the system to automatically detect what are you doing with your Power BI files. So in this scenario, what we're going to show you here, I have a credit card number that I uploaded to Power BI. We have a regex expression in there. So there's, I think, like 250 default things that it knows, like patient, like a social security number in the US, credit card numbers, things like this. It can automatically detect. And when that is automatically detected, a few things happen. So you upload it to the Power BI service, you publish it. Immediately you get a message, and you'll see it in a second. Immediately you get a message saying, hey, you uploaded secure data to Power BI, but also your compliance manager, you can say who can get the email. Your compliance manager also got an email saying, hey, someone uploaded credit card information to this Power BI service, or patient information, or whatever you want to, customer names, or whatever you want. And now automatically publishing it here, and immediately you will go to the service, and you will see, hey, there's a problem happening here. So you get a warning on top. Now, this is only the beginning. I did ask the team, because what would be really cool if you can actually block upload completely. That's not there yet, but they say they're working on it. I don't know a timeline, but that would be really cool. They say, oh, you're uploading credit card information. You just cannot upload it to the Power BI server. That would be really cool, and this is only the beginning. So immediately you get the log file too. You can see people did things to Power BI that are really bad, and you get a warning. All right. Data cataloging here too. Purview data catalog, it allows you to search, browse, curate data, intelligent recommendations, lineage visual. I think the most important thing here is people just want to know what's going on in their estate. Like, what are people doing with the data? And or even for like sometimes regulation sakes or things like this. Oh, I have an SAP data source over here, and it has some financial data in it. Which reports are using that data? That could be very interesting and interesting. So Power BI automatically connects to it through scanner APIs. So Purview automatically connects to Power BI and gets all the information continuously. But there are APIs, so if you want to do it yourself, without Purview, you can do it too. The APIs are there. It also works for not Microsoft tools, data lineaging tools, like Colibra is a big name there here a lot. Two, Colibra also works with this. They use the same functionalities and features. So it gives you a graph of everything that's going on. And it also classifies it. It also works with the MIP labels. It's also really cool. So you can automatically see, okay, which highly confidential files do I have? And what are people doing with it? It automatically shows all of that stuff. Not everything is supported yet. So there, as it says there, there's 35 data sources and growing. Because what you really want is, let's say you have a SQL server that you use as a data warehouse, and you have stored procedures in there that run to do massage data and to do things with it. In the past, it couldn't read those. So the lineage stops there. It doesn't know where it comes from. Now it can actually read those. And yeah, it can go further down into the stack. So, okay, now I know where it comes from. Okay, this store procedure gets data from here, here, and here. And okay, so now I can draw a line further down into the lineage. And some data sources were not supported. Now we can start looking into more data sources. And this is a continuously growing list. Okay, so now this is exactly your scenario that you were talking about. Download is blocked. So this is another tool. It's called Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. That is some sort of a proxy, if you will, that runs on top of Power BI. And in that, you can configure a lot more things. For example, you can block, okay, if you're not on a Microsoft device, or no, not a Microsoft device, your organization's device, for example, like on your own personal device or something, you won't be able to download anything. And there's many, many, many more security things on here. Like, for example, this gives you an additional security layer on top. Like, for example, it checks double logins. So let's say I log into Power BI now, here from UK, and the same moment, or within a couple of minutes, I log into Power BI from home in the Netherlands. It's not possible. This thing will automatically detect that and start sending warnings. There are many, many, many more scenarios in it. That's why it's called Defender for Cloud Apps. So it defends your applications. You can also use it for your own applications. It also works for Office. It also works for many other organizations. But probably the most important one is this: you cannot download anything. And again, there's a whole compliance center in the back that shows you what's going on. People have been trying to download things, and you get warnings and signals. All right. Okay, so that's about the most important thing on that one is, MIP labeling. That's probably the most important feature. And this is what actually enables a lot of organizations to say, okay, we trust my business users enough to start opening up for self-service BI. Instead of IT just doing everything, because we know, together with Purview, you can see where all your reports are living. We know it's secured by setting those mandatory labels to highly confidential. And many organizations actually have this turned on for Office, but they don't turn it on for Power BI because they're different teams that don't talk to each other, and the Power BI people often don't know it's even there for Power BI too. So you can turn it on there. Of course, I do have to say that is not included with a Power BI license. So you need a separate MIP license for it. Again, there are many different things that Microsoft licenses and where it is included. So check it out. Again, I've heard many times before that it was just there for them. They just didn't check it to have it turned on for Power BI. And the same thing goes for all these things. Like Purview is a separate service in Power BI, in Azure, and Defender for Cloud is also, again, a separate application. But I think probably MIP labels is probably one of the most important ones. Okay, so what about the single version of the truth? And this is another interesting question. Again, this goes back to what we talked about before, often struggling with self-service versus central management. How can we govern this? What problems will we face? I'm just going to lock it down. No one can use Power BI. And we've heard this many times. But if you tighten things down, people will do it themselves anyway, right? We've seen this many times before. They have Access files, Excel files, whatever. They will use it anyway. So, instead, embrace and support it. And this, again, is a super important part. Publishing those centralized data sets. So you don't have to build everything for them. Like I recently did, you might know, I also record a podcast. I did an interesting episode with ABN AMRO Bank, which is a big bank in the Netherlands, and they have completely turned around from fully IT building everything to IT does not build any reports anymore. None. The only thing they do is first of all, they have all the security features I just talked about because it is a bank. So MIP labeling, all of these things are turned on. But they do is people come, and actually I didn't talk about that feature. With all the AD stuff, you can also do something like, okay, the first time someone logs into Power BI, they have to sign a terms license or something. So they put the onus on their users. Say, you can use whatever you want, but you're going to have to sign a contract to be able to start using this. So they trust and govern and help them instead of just blocking things by default. So again, they do the centralized certified data sets and dataset hub, sensitivity labels for MIP, for data loss prevention, and then Defender for cloud rules for detecting malicious attempts and things like this. So, I think one topic I don't talk about here, but the thing that helps most, again, here is that creating a center of excellence for your users, talking to them, working with them, instead of just like, the thing that we care about the most is two things in the Power BI team. We care about, are people actually using our product? Because if they don't use our product, but we also look at features. And we also know how happy you are with Power BI, because you get that pop-up box all the time, right? Saying, how likely are you to tell someone that you want to use Power BI? That's called Net Promoter Score, NPS. And we know it by organization. So, and in the early days of Power BI, we would actually reach out to some of the organizations that had a really bad NPS. People were not happy. And 9 out of 10 times, why they were not happy is because IT turned on Power BI for everything, for everyone, and that's it. They didn't tell them anything. They didn't give them any help. There was no place for them to know where to get the data sources from, what to do, and they were just, what is this shitty tool? And we are, so that's really bad. So that's why we now have a white paper that talks about how to set up this center of excellence. How to set up a center of excellence. How do you help your people? How do you guide them along? That's really important. And then, so that's embracing and supporting. Power BI, we kind of talked about it already. Power BI is available everywhere. And Power BI has a lot of certifications. That's another of those check boxes that a lot of people care about. Because when you talk about data, you have to be able to say it's certified or not. The one that's my absolute favorite, I always talk about, is the one in the middle with the cute bunny. You see that? Cute bunny? This is the Tax Authority of Japan certification. They have the cute bunny certification. So Power BI has a cute bunny certification too. But all these things aside, there's like, I don't know exactly how many certifications, but a lot. But you can see some very serious ones like IRS, HIPAA, FedRAMP, especially in the US, they are important. We also have a few very important German ones that allows us to operate in Germany. They also like their certificates. There are a lot. But yeah, so if you want to figure out if Power BI has a certain certificate, there is something called the Trust Center, the Microsoft Trust Center. That's where you can find everything for every Microsoft product. So that's where all the whole list of all certifications are. Now, the last slide, putting it all together before we open it up for questions. Power BI is designed to be secure by default. I was just looking at this.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was the...
So data residency, Power BI has a large global footprint in 45 data centers worldwide. Multi-geo capacities, that's important. That's what really made Power BI work for a lot of organizations. Certifications, okay, here it is. 119 local and international, 34 local industry certifications. Network security, I mean, this is a huge thing at Microsoft, all up, of course. Service tags, private links, VNet, TLS 1.2 enforcement. Again, most people won't say anything, but if you talk to your InfoSec team, this is the first question they will ask. Data encryption, you can bring your own key to encrypt your premium capacities through Azure Key Vault. Double encryption at rest, so all the data is double encrypted. And then the data loss prevention, the hero feature that no one knows about. Classify and protect data with MIP, monitor and protect with MCAS, Microsoft Cloud App Security, integrate security policies and auditing. And then, yeah, as a Power BI tenant administrator, you have so many features. If you're a Power BI admin, I would say regularly just go back and check. Or what I usually do is go to the help documents and see what has got added this time. Like there's so many different things that are going on here. All right, and that's it. Any questions? Yeah.
Wait.
Oh,
Yeah, I have a few questions. So the first one is it possible to block personal workspaces? We have more than 40K personal workspaces.
what was the new? Do you know the answer?
So it's not possible to block personal workspaces, but the My Workspace governance that Kasper showed before will allow you as an admin to define that all the workspaces are assigned to certain capacities. And so what you could do is you could assign them to a small ACE queue and disable that ACE queue or shut down that ACE queue. So by this, nobody would be able to access. That's
But again, the question
kind
here
of a
is,
workaround.
what are you going to, like, we have this conversation a lot. Why would you want to do it?
Yeah.
So basically, because we want to control what people publish.
Yeah, the better way is to actually use monitoring and logging to actually control what is published there, especially with the growing capabilities that are coming there. Just highlighting also, sorry to add here, Kasper, if you look at the release wave, at the roadmap, you can already see that we have in addition for that, with sensitivity labels, we have the plan to actually block access for external users based on sensitivity labels, which will happen as access in the cloud. So they wouldn't even be able to control that or to open the reports. That's the first thing, and that is just the first step. And for DLP, we can in future already block based on DLP policies exporting data. The thing you showed as well with Cloud Apps or Defender for Cloud Apps, we could do with DLP policies, blocking access. And so we're working on those, but for the time being, you can...
But the main thing is, like, you can turn off the My Workspace, but then they'll find another way to do it. So it's better to do it the other way around.
Well, we control them with the logs, with the other logs, so we control what is going on in all the personal workspaces.
Yeah.
Ideally, I would like that no one is publishing that.
Yeah, so both ways. Either you put them on a premium and use DLP policies to actually check everything, or you could use that small trick to block them.
Premium is problematic as well because we work in multi-region. So, for example, the US, if we say that, okay, put it in this region that is in Europe, but
so now
we have a label in the US, so everything will be...
With this new feature, you can control that too.
Yeah.
But can you say to which?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every different level?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's possible.
Right, there was more. One more.
All of the MIP features you were talking about there, are they available in Pro as well as in Premium?
Yeah. Yes. But again, no. No.
DLP policies are premium only.
Right, okay.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Yeah.
So about the documentation of the audit logs for the activities and operations, why they don't explain much of what they mean? Because some of them is basically impossible to tell what they mean, if that makes sense. So you have like, I don't know, 300 different activities. Some of them even they don't explain what they are.
I don't know, but it's good feedback. I'll give it back.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
What we could tell there maybe is that we might want to improve the documentation, but actually explaining more on the actual log is hard, because if you think about what we're already logging there, how huge amount of data is actually coming by logging all the activities, we try to keep the information we store as short as possible just to save space. But if the documentation is not good enough, that's definitely feedback we want to follow up on.
Actually, I've heard that before. So, yeah, good feedback. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your time.